This is kind of something that people have been asking me to do for a while. I feel like I open a lot of videos with that statement, but this is kind of, yeah. This is like a big one, right? It's ranking every Boondocks episode. Admittedly, I didn't really want to do this because I was like, I wanted to make separate videos about like all of these episodes, and I will do that at some point in this kind of retrospective thing. But like, I recognize that this is a video that a lot of people want from me. I recognize that people kind of want to get my general thoughts and where I stand on this series and whatever. So I'm just gonna jump in. The Garden Party, right? Garden Party is the first episode of the show. I would put the Garden Party in B tier. The Garden Party is like really interesting, like in terms of its premise. It's effectively the setup for the Boondocks, like black kids taken to an all-white suburb, and it is. Ironically, the Garden Party is the premise of the Boondocks. Like, if we kind of take it very literally, right? The Garden Party is the Boondocks pitch in a lot of ways. And I remember Aaron saying it was inspired by like a lot of his experiences giving speeches and talking about the comic strip, and kind of the discomforts he had involved in that. I think this episode has some good jokes. I think, what it's saying is interesting. Speaking personally, some of the Ruckus stuff doesn't really land that much for me. So like, I find the beginning part with Ruckus is like kind of funny. Like, I think his introduction is good. I think him being drunk at the party isn't that entertaining personally, so I wasn't really like a big fan of that. And the episode feels a bit and I didn't really like Ed in this episode, and usually I do like Ed. Like Ed's kind of a he's George Bush parody, what have you, so he's interesting in that. But like, I just feel like the episode as a whole is kind of slow. It's not really that entertaining. I know Dorian's still gonna like that, but like, the truth is, it's not. When I show people this episode, and even when I'm going back to the Boondocks, it's not that I'll skip this one. It's just that this isn't the episode that gets like, it doesn't hook me the way that it has shock value, but it doesn't hook me the same way that like some other episodes do that are probably like higher on this list. The Itis. I'll put the Itis in like A tier. I think the Itis has some interesting stuff to say about gentrification, some critiques of capitalism, soul food. What is gosh, man. It raises some interesting questions about not just culture but tradition, right? And they don't use the word tradition, but it feels like the episode is about tradition, right? And this idea of this is just what we do, and challenging the things that we did for survival in the past, challenging the things that we've always done, and kind of adding some context to why we do those things and why maybe some of the things that we do might not be that beneficial. I think a lot of the jokes are funny. I think Huey's great in this episode. It's like very they have the Asheru song. Like, yeah, no, this is a good episode, and I think the way it ends is really clever. Like, season 1 has this issue, I will say, where it's like the message is very much thrown in your face. Like, you can't miss it. Like, you can't miss. And this is why a lot of people say season 1's the best, is because like it's so in your face. Like, there's nothing left to interpretation for the most part with season 1. And I think that's good in some ways, as I think later on in the show sometimes messages get muddied, but in other ways it's like there's no room for interpretation. Like, there's not much room for interpretation. There's not much room to kind of like pick up on these things by yourself. And so as a result, like, it feels, and this is just a season 1 complaint, it feels like a lot of season 1 is telling you its message as well as showing you, which isn't terrible, and in some places that works, but it's not my favorite. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, no, the Itis, great episode. Some good commentary. Yeah, like some good stuff. It's a good Grandad episode. Like, it brings everyone together. Like, there's some good. The Pete's Cobbler joke. Yeah, that's good. Like, yeah, that's some good stuff. Yeah. Let's nab Oprah. Oh man. It's between C and B tier. The reason I didn't like. Oh god. It has the Bushido Brown fight. It has not if I take you down first. It has that. I love that joke. It has a lot of MF Doom. I feel like, okay, you know what? On that premise, I think I have to put it in B. It has the first Huey and Riley fight. You know what? Yeah, this episode is kind of. It also establishes a sense of continuity because it references the date with the health inspector within it, right? And that was something the first season seemed to do, like in bits and pieces. But there does seem to be this kind of self-referential like energy in place. It's interesting. I think it's a good episode. It's not, again, going back to that point, it's not the episode I would throw on. I think the plot of Huey, I think this episode muddies Riley in the sense that I think what Aaron is going for is, oh, okay, yeah, you know what, yeah, actually, yeah, I'm gonna put Let's Nab Oprah in front of the Garden Party, because I think in that vein, a lot of the commentary on George Bush and the administration, when you look at it from that perspective, is really interesting. I like the joke of robbing the bank and them owning, like, your dad owns the bank, so, I mean, what are you robbing? You know, I think that's clever. I like the idea that, like, in fact, no, I don't. I don't like the idea that Riley is more... I think what Aaron's going for is, like, Riley is more gangster than, like, say, Ed and Rummy, right? I think that's what Aaron's kind of going for in this episode. It's kind of unclear. When I feel like that kind of goes against, and to kind of get into this with some of my better, like the Riley episodes I really enjoy, but I always kind of prefer when Riley is more kind of taken aback by how far people are willing to go in the moment, whereas it feels like Riley, and I like Riley scheming in this episode, but it feels like Riley is more about it in this episode. Like, yeah, this is what we need to do. This is what we're gonna do, right? And it's more just like Ed and Rummy kind of messing up. So, like, I don't know. I think still B tier, still in B tier. Like, great stuff, but like, yeah, talk about that way too long. Let's see. Riley was here. This first S tier. I think. Bob Rush, can't go wrong. You got the Troy reference in there. CL Smooth, Pete Rock. It's like this interesting episode about like cultural appropriation and like the stealing of black work, you know. Riley's demonized for putting his name on his own work, but when he doesn't, his work is stolen, you know. There's interesting stuff there. There's this idea of like you know, you get this kind of almost, and it does take some pushing, but you get to see like a really softer side of Riley. I can also kind of imagine writing this episode was interesting for Aaron because he'd come off the back of spending like 5 to 6 years writing a comic strip. I remember he had an interview where he complained about people stealing his work and all that stuff. So yeah, no, I think, yeah, it's a great episode. Like I don't want to talk too much about it because, again, I want to drop a video about it, but this is kind of one of the stronger episodes. Definitely. I think everything in S tier is kind of because the Boondocks can be very vulgar, right? It's not a show that you just kind of, a lot of people are like, yeah, it's from Boondocks, from like Stink Meaner. No, like not everyone's gonna respond positively to that. And if you've actually like, obviously if you're very like, it depends on your space, right? But not everybody's like, you know, that, yeah, that into it. So it's just, it's you know, it's interesting. Wingmen, oh man, that's another S tier, I think. Got some interesting, obviously I think I've told this story. I think it's reminiscent of some of Aaron's issues with, you know, his friendship groups, right? And how ties into the Boondocks' themes, you know, this idea of being Huey and Riley were kind of against their will, like kind of taken to this white suburbia, right? They come back to find their friends, and all their friends are like, well, you clearly have changed, and we know from the fact that they've moved from this location, they've been isolated from this location, that like they haven't changed, but it's about the perception of who they are, not who they actually are. You know, and it ties so much back to the Boondocks' like core themes and core ideas of this idea of just, you know, the idea that there are very rigid ideas of what blackness is. There are very rigid ideas of what it means to be black. And perception isn't everything, and how much of an effort that Huey and Riley took, because they are insecure, they are worried about it, to kind of push and embrace their black identity, almost sometimes to a fault, or their ideas, not like the fact that embracing your blackness is bad, but more like, the ideas that they've taken from the media, and how far they're willing to go with that. It's interesting then to have a character come in and be like, hey, you're not really about it, because you're from Woodcrest and I'm from Chicago. Really interesting stuff. MF Doom, I think, is in this one again. Or is it? No, it's the sample. Fancy Clown. Great sample. Great music track for this episode. Trying to think if there's anything else. But yeah, no, I think that was the main stuff. I think it's a great episode. I love this episode. It's sad. It has some Khalil Gibran at the end. And it gives me almost that Peanuts energy. And I'm not sure if by the time I've uploaded this, I will have uploaded the Peanuts video. But certainly, like, Boondocks episodes that lean into that Peanuts influence, I'm always gonna have a bit of a preference for. Great episode. The block is hot. It's a very Jasmine focused episode. I think Gabby Soleil is great, but also because she's like a child actress, sometimes some of the delivery can feel a bit off. Nothing you can really do about that. I think she gets better throughout the show. Again, that's the Peanuts. I love the use of Public Enemy in this one. I like that you get to show off some of Huey's music taste. I like the riot. The police shooting, I mean, yeah, it's a bit. I like the idea of kind of using Ruckus for that and kind of flipping that on its head. It's an interesting inversion. How the town reacted and how easily they were able to move on. I think it actually ties into. Aaron wrote a piece in Charlemagne's new book. Don't ask how I know this. A friend of mine told me, and so I had to find out. But Aaron wrote a piece in in Charlemagne's book. He kind of spoke about this idea that due to the fact that there's a lack of attachment to black people, there is that like lack of care. There is that lackadaisical attitude, and I can see that perspective in this episode. I think it's really good. It's really thingy. I wouldn't put it an S. I put it like high A, but I wouldn't put it an S. Passion of Reverend Ruckus, that's an easy S tier again. I don't know where I'd put in S tier. These aren't all ordered. I don't know where I'd put in S tier. I like that it's unlike a Huey Freeman Christmas, it doesn't kind of directly. It's one of those Boondocks episodes that, like, ironically lets you draw your own conclusion. Depending on where you stand, and I like that it's very sincere in what it says about like faith and God and religion. It seems very sincere in that regard. I like its critique of how people weaponize faith against people, and how everything Ruckus is doing is basically a commentary on how like certain religions have been weaponized against black people. Long story short, that seems to be the gist of the message there, right? And Ruckus is just a muse to kind of push that message, whereas Huey seems to be a muse for like that kind of black cynicalism, maybe to like faith and religion and God will know have you, due to the circumstances that black people have gone through, be it the black liberation struggle, Black Panthers, what have you. And so you get to see this contrast in perspective where Jasmine is saying maybe it could help to have a little more faith, and see what you can do. And Huey, and even like I think Grandad says the same thing, and Huey is constantly saying like, no, I need to do something. And by the end of the episode, it's kind of like a mix of both that kind of does it. And I think that's an interesting element, that kind of some things are out of your control, but try to control what is in your control. And I think that's like I think it's a great episode. I won't put it above Riley Was Here and Wingmen, but I think it's really solid. I don't know how long I've been recording. God, 15 minutes? All right, it's the problem. I can talk about this show if it's way too long. Trial of R. Kelly. I'm going to put it at the bottom of B. I'm tired seeing that speech at the end, because I don't think it's like... It ties into that problem with season 1, where it's like, hey guys, like, instead of making the message clear, I've got something to say. You know, the MLK episode does this too, where it's like, I think the rest of the episode is so strong in some ways. Well, maybe Trial of Vicarious is a bit more messy, but so the rest of the parts of the episode are so strong, right? And then it kind of ends on this kind of speech that isn't bad. I think it's a good speech. Of all the kind of end of episode, like, hey, I got something to say moments, I think this is one of the stronger ones. But because I'm not a big fan of it, and because it's been like posted and played on repeat a million times, I'm kind of tired of it. I'm tired of this episode, and this is some bias because I am overexposed. But I do think it's an episode that I have to put it over the garden party, because I think it's an episode it will probably get a laugh out of you. An injustice anywhere is an injustice anywhere. Amen. I like that. I like the stuff with the lawyer. I like R.I.P. He said Adam West, but yeah, like R.I.P. The lawyer was great. Let's see the stuff with Tom. Like, it's good stuff there. I didn't like Riley's stuff in this episode. I don't like how they're so coy about what happened. And I think they could have explored it in a more delicate way, or better yet, maybe, I don't know. Like, for some people, it's like, yeah, who cares? But it's like, you know, these were real people, you know? And it's always messy to kind of, you know, especially when you're doing satire, comedic, adult humor, what have you, to kind of navigate those things. But I think they could have been a lot more delicate given the subject matter, but that's just me. I know some people, it's like, I don't care, come on, man, they had to be like very raw and thingy. But yeah, like, even like the whole, like, well, we also got to think of personal responsibility here, you know, like an accountability. And it's like, it ties into that Dave Chappelle bit where it's like, how old is 15 really, you know? And I'm not a big fan of that. Didn't like it. In fact, I might have to pop that down just for that premise. I would put it in C, but there are some jokes and moments I love a lot in this episode, so yeah. Guess who's coming to dinner? That's a D tier. I don't like I'm sorry. I like the use of Gold Digger in the episode. I like how it ends with Grandad waiting with the candles. But it ties into the show's issue with its presentation of women. And first of all, I don't like what this episode is kind of saying about sex workers, but it's also kind of like, it ties into kind of what the show's overarching issue with how it presents women is like. They're all just kind of vessels for telling the male stories effectively, and with an exception of maybe Jasmine, right? And even then, sometimes she still leans into that. A lot of the women in this show just serve as vessels to tell male stories, and it's the same thing with Grandad. And you know, there's nothing you can really like avoid with that in terms of just you have a predominantly male cast, but by virtue of having that predominantly male cast, I think you have to be a lot more careful when you're introducing these characters, and you're kind of going to see this with time, the more I kind of get into these. But there's a big and when you're a guy, you can't see it, and I'll be blunt, like, it's very easy to just kind of, because I didn't see it for a long time, and then I tested it and I showed the Boondocks to quite a few women, and they didn't like it. I said, I don't like how, you know, they're presenting the women in this show, right? And it did make me take a step back and go, well, actually, you know, yeah, it is interesting that there isn't like a prominent female character in the show, and it is interesting that, like, you know, they are all being used as vessels to kind of tell these male stories. I think that, guess who's coming to the, because are there good jokes? No. Yeah, I think it's a D, man. Like, I like Slickback at the end, but he's like the best part of the episode. And I would have liked if he was the only one doing what he was doing, like treating Cristal that way and kind of whatever. But because it's like the whole episode is like, we need to do something about this woman. It's like, yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. It doesn't make me laugh that much. If I'm throwing it on, it's just, I'm probably just gonna watch the end of the episode on YouTube. So yeah, that's my opinion. Yeah, Grandad's fight. This is a hard one because I think the ramifications of this episode are big. I think there's so much to say about where this episode came from historically, right? Be it the Chris Rock bit, Dave Chappelle, what have you. This kind of the positioning of black people versus niggas is like a very big conversation. So it is really interesting. Yeah. I guess it's a good episode. I like that a lot of it is in their head. And I think what the other episodes miss out on in doing that, like, and this, yeah, I think a lot of the other episodes miss out on this, right? They don't play into the ideas, and this is why you might see an interesting take here later on. But it's also why, like, the best Stink Meaner episodes to me are the ones where, like, he's not even that much of a threat. Do you know what I mean? This is all just your ego, you know? And when they lean into that and it becomes like, do you really need to do this? I think that's when those episodes are at their best. I think when they're doing the positioning of black people versus niggas and all this stuff, like, I don't think that's great. But when you have like Riley's instigating, Huey's paranoia in his dream, like childlike dream, and just Grandad's ego, and it all feeds into the culmination of this big moment of regret and sadness, and yeah, like, it's really good. So yeah, I don't want to put it in S. I can't put it in S because, again, I don't like. And it's not that it's not funny. I want to say it's not that it's not funny, but like sometimes, and I grew up with a lot of satire. I grew up Life of Brian, Family Guy, Cleveland Show, American Dad, all the Seth MacFarlane adjacent shows, all these kind of, like, satire isn't something I'm unfamiliar with, at least, especially in an animated medium. It's just that, like, and I'm finding something inappropriate funny, it also isn't that difficult for me. But even I can recognize if just because I find something funny doesn't mean it's kind of what I think should be said, you know. And I like, not all, some people need to acknowledge is not all humor is good humor. Do you know what I mean? Like, just because you have a dark sense of humor doesn't mean you should have a dark sense of humor. Usually that dark sense of humor is conditioning or like a lack of sympathy a lot of the time. It's a funny episode. There's funny stuff, funny jokes, and I like, yeah, but it's just, yeah, I don't know, I'm yapping a bit too much. But Date with a Health Inspector, I like the bit at the end on the invasion of Iraq. I don't like the idea of making Jasmine like this kind of 9/11 scare fearmongerer type beat, like where it's like terror level orange, this that. Like, I feel like you could have done something like that with, like, I don't know, Sarah or Tom. It feels weird to do it with a child, but I get it, just purely from that, you know, going back to the core of, like, you know, it's about how these circumstances affect the kids and all this stuff. So yeah, I get it, I understand, but, you know, I think they could have done a better job with it. All the anal rape jokes, I think, have aged really poorly. That'll tell you what I think of the Date with the Booty Warrior. And just, yeah, I like that part at the end. But let's see, is there anything else? I also think the animation in this episode wasn't great. Like, yeah, it's well boarded, and I like the exploration into Tom's past and they had something really interesting at the beginning where they kind of talk about this idea of Tom becoming a prosecutor and him sending people to the same fate that he wanted to avoid. That was really interesting. I did like that. I think I'll give it a C tier still. But it is an interesting episode for sure. Yeah, I'm thinking. I might not be able to cover like every episode I'm deeping. Like, I probably can't cover every episode, and this might just have to be season 1. Like, I think that's interesting. Well, okay, we might be back. Let's see. The Story of Gangstalicious. It's strong. I think this is really. Let's see, A or S. A or S? A or S? Maybe A? It's A or S. I think I'm gonna give it A. Because there is one small moment in the episode where it feels a little slow and awkward. So the moment where like Riley is kind of rolling himself down the stairs and trying to find all these excuses to kind of get to the hospital, all those gags, I don't think they land for me. I love the opening of the episode, just like the nigga versions of Cuban Missile Crisis. The fight. I like that I like that it was an animation error and it wasn't supposed to be that violent. I like Eat Dirt. I like basically, like I said before, anything where it's kind of challenging Riley's ideas from the media. Really interesting stuff. I think this was the most popular episode from season 1. And even the punchline at the end, and it mixed the feelings to the idea of like the punchline being, you're gay. But like, yeah, it is interesting. I'm gonna give it, I'll give it an A. I think I'll put it in A too, but it's very close to S. I might change it. A Huey Freeman Christmas, that's an S tier episode. It does a lot of the same things the Passion of, in fact, you know what, yeah, I might have to put it above, because it does a lot of the same things the Passion of Reverend Ruckus does, but slightly better, because the Passion of Reverend Ruckus is very specifically and more focused like religious commentary, right? Like whereas a Huey Freeman Christmas is a lot more like not nihil. It's like a mix of more things. It does more. Do you know what I mean? It does some of the stuff that the Passion of Reverend Ruckus does, right? So it leans in some of that, but then it does a lot more on top of that. Like, it has this thing of, you know, Huey, you got creative vision, you can do whatever you want. No, not really, right? It speaks to how executive meddling can completely hamper the vision of what you're trying to do, you know? To the point where something as simple as going, oh, I think we're gonna make Jesus white, for instance, in that context, right? When it completely flies in the face of what the play was about. Like, there's interesting stuff there. You have Riley's resentment of Santa, you have Jasmine like clinging to this idea, you have Ruckus playing the role. That's good stuff. I think it's a strong episode, really strong episode, and there are like allegories made, and they're pretty obvious allegories now, like, oh, like Santa's supposed to represent this and blah blah blah. But I think because this episode does the Passion of, and I love Passion of Reverend Ruckus, especially the song at the end, that elevates it a lot. Isabella Anthea or Antenna, I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry, I ain't got the accent, but incredible stuff. But Huey Freeman Christmas might just edge it out. Two more. Whew. All right, cool. The Real, the White Shadow stuff is great. I love that they used the oak tree more in this episode. Any episode where they use that is more. I watched Pimp My Ride growing up. I think some of the interviews are funny. I think like Pimp My Ride for America for 9/11. I think that's funny. That's really funny. I really like that. But there's a lot of, this episode's really awkward, right? And it's really interesting. I like it, but it's also really awkward. And I think the best parts of the episode are with Huey. And when the episode isn't focusing on Huey, I don't think the episode is doing much to engage me. So I'm sad to say, because I really like this one, and I love Huey's like introspective moments in it. I might have to give it like C. It's not. And it's not that like the episode. This is a weird one because the B plot is so interesting and so good. I just wish they had more of the B plot than the A plot of, you know, the Pimp My Ride stuff. I think the B plot was way more interesting. with because the White Shadow is such an interesting concept. It's like a play on, the informants of, the Black Panthers and the Black Panther Party. It's a play on Aaron's own paranoia of the fact that he was making something very radical in Hollywood, and his fear of there is that White Shadow. The idea that the White Shadow could have been a figment of his imagination or a very real thing, and leaving that up to interpretation was really interesting, right? Even the name, the White Shadow, and being something that you can see, but a shadow that you can see but is constantly following you like during the day, it's really great. I love it. It's just that the A plot wasn't that interesting, which is a shame. And lastly, okay, cool, I don't know if we're gonna do the whole thing because I have been recording for 30 minutes and I've only done season 1. Let's see. Return of the King. Return of the King. I think Return of the King, this episode is really good right until the speech at the end. The speech at the end holds it back, but everything else, from like non-violent direct action, kind of parallel, basically in some ways it's like Huey P. Newton meets Martin Luther King Jr., right? It's very clearly a commentary on the violent, vengeful nature of post 9/11 America, right? There's great, interesting stuff there. How Martin Luther King Jr.'s ideas of turning the other cheek would be kind of looked down on by the more war-hungry, like government and what have you, and the world at large again after that, right? And just kind of, it seemed to just be an episode about the frustration with where the world had gone at large, but also just how like far removed we are from that era of Martin Luther King Jr. And I feel that more and more as, we're in 2024 now. The episode came out nearly 20 years ago. I feel that more and more as time goes on. I just wish the episode didn't end with a nigga speech, to be honest, right? Like, I wish it didn't end with him, like, just kind of... Because it was really just a rap written by Asheru with some stuff at the end that I could tell was by Aaron, BET, what have you, right? But I think the message of the episode is a lot more potent without the, hey, man, black people, you need to get it together. And what... It conflicts me, right? Because on one hand, I know that like there's a lot of people like it. A lot of people look at that and they go like, oh man, yeah, man, black people need to get it together. We need to get it together, man. We need to get it together. And it's like, if you are someone that is predisposed to be critical of black people, right? You're gonna love it. But he's not actually saying anything, if anything, it ties into the problem with Grandad's fight, where it's just the positioning of there are black people and then there are niggas, and you don't want to be a part. You want to be one of them. And oh man, this kind of ties into my thoughts on the S word, the N word, all this stuff, right? It's like this positioning of we don't want to be like we don't want to be like that when like it ties into my thoughts in the end, where it's like, it's supposed to be this term of endearment, but we are constantly using it in a derogatory way. And yeah, we have the right to do that. And I don't think it's anyone's right to tell a black person, no, stop, right? But I do think that it ties a lot into my thoughts in the S word, but I do think it's just dishonest. Do you know what I mean? It's dishonest to pretend like it's anything that it isn't. Even when I use the word, right? I'm not using it positively. I'm not referring to anyone. Like, everyone is like, yeah, that's how you greet your brother. It's like, yeah, no. Like, no. Not that often. Like, not that often, and not without it feeling a bit awkward, right? It's not that you can't. It's not that I wouldn't. It's not that people don't. It's that it's rarely actually used as a term of endearment, right? And so when you have you basically have Martin Luther King come up after this great episode about what it means to rally people together and these different means of reaching the people, be it door to door, digital, getting on shows, and how messages can be diluted in that process. Really, really interesting stuff. It all gets undercut by that, like, hey man, black people, you gotta do better. Do you know what I mean? And it's not about, it goes back to like kind of that bootstrap politic, you know. It's Aaron actually wrote in that like a Charlemagne book, and I'll end this video on this, right? I'll end this video. I won't be able to get up the quote, right? Or maybe I will, it depends. But like, it reminds me a lot of that kind of what he wrote in that book, right? Where it's like so much of like our politics or ideas are ultimately framed around like, you know, the comfort or discomfort or lack thereof of white people, right? And even like the framing of black people, you don't want to be a nigga. That is using like effectively racist white people's politics and weaponizing that against black people. And I'm speaking personally to not really a big fan of that. And that's why the speech at the end with Martin Luther King, it doesn't really resonate with me as much anymore. It's like when you first hear it, like, yeah, because the whole episode is kind of portrayed black people as really ignorant and, you know, right? And it's just, yeah, okay, cool. If you want to give it that framing, sure. But then you just kind of, you conjured up an excuse just to call black people niggas. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I know Aaron isn't afraid to kind of air people's dirty laundry, but I just think there was a more graceful way to end the episode. I know that was a lot of yap, but that's kind of my perspective on it. I think they could have done a better job at phrasing, not only that, the kind of they could have done a job at like kind of framing his speech, and also just like, you know, yeah, maybe make it different, because it was such a strong episode outside that. With all of that said, I'm gonna give it an A. I think I'm gonna put above Grandad's fight. Story of Gangstalicious. I know it sounds like I hate it. You know what? Yeah, I have to put it near Grandad's fight because it has the same issue, but the other stuff it does is so good, so I can't hate on it that much. I can't. Whereas those episodes that are like, and for me, it's like I can tolerate some of the stuff, the politics. I'm like, do you know what I mean? To a lot more when the other stuff it's doing is so interesting. And this is kind of what I mean by having like nuanced conversations about the Boondocks, because I don't think this show is perfect. It really isn't, right? I love it. I think it is so interesting to talk about, and there's so much interesting history behind it, but it is not perfect. This is season 1, right? We already got a D tier. You know, I think there's one episode in every season that is really bad that I don't return to. I never pretty much guess I was coming to dinner. I never do. It's not good. I don't like it. It's not funny. You know, like, or the garden party. Like, that episode's really slow, but the message there is really interesting. So it's really yeah. I think if I could even go back, I think it's a toss-up. I might give Wingmen. I give it to Wingmen over Riley Was Here, because I think I resonate with it a lot more, especially as someone that grew up to be a very busy person and struggles to kind of like keep contact with their friends and their loved ones. I think Wingmen resonates with me more. So yeah, that's my season 1 tier list. It's funny how this video was originally supposed to be what's it called, like the whole thing, and then I did season 1 and I said, okay, I don't think I could do this. Okay, so yeah, all right, if you guys want to see me rank the rest of the Boondock seasons, just let me know. But yeah, I'm not ready, because this is what I mean when I say I can just yap. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I do this, it's gonna be like, I'm gonna be here for 3 hours. You know, like, let me look at the recording now. I've been talking for 40 minutes. You know, so like, yeah. Thank you guys so much for your time. If you guys want to see more, just let me know. Leave a comment. Do you agree? Do you disagree? You can leave a like, subscribe. It's great for the algorithm, all that stuff. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Peace.